Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. Thanks for your patience during the delay between episodes. Today we continue following the adventures of Quasar and Dazzler Volume 1, issues number 9 and 10. This issue stands out as portraying Project Pegasus in a distinctly different light than what we've seen it portrayed in the past. Throughout this comic, the staff remains cold and aloof towards Dazzler, often using intimidating tactics and misdirection to avoid answering her questions. Since this is the only time we see people in the facility acting this way, and the next storyline directly involved with Project Pegasus involves a takeover by the Serpent Crown, if the Crown was already exuding its psychic draw over the facility from when Ben Grimm dropped it off in Marvel 2-in-1 issue, I think, number 67, it could explain why everybody is acting so dang rude. Case in point, after being tailed for weeks, Dazzler is approached by two men who intimidate her into a car. She feels that she has been kidnapped despite the fact that the men don't act in an outwardly aggressive manner towards her. I'll use these two panels where they switch from the car to the helicopter to show what I mean. Dazzler asks, "What's going on?" And the response she gets is a simple, "Trust us, Miss Blair. Please put on your seatbelt. It would be a shame if you injured yourself during our journey." This is the kind of language that makes it pretty clear that this guy is making indirect threats. Soon, Dazzler finds herself being flown into the Project Pegasus research facility. Upon landing, she's informed of where she is and told that they would like to help her explore her abilities and test her potential. In a totally out-of-character move, one of the Project Pegasus staff blackmails Dazzler into participating under the threat of outing her status as a mutant to the public, a move that could have negative consequences for her singing career. As soon as Dazzler agrees to participate, Security Chief Wendell Vaughn is introduced, better known as Quasar. This is 2 appearances in a row where Quasar has his identity outed. Yikes! The two heroes instantly hit it off, and Quasar gives Dazzler a tour of the facility. The last place Quasar shows Dazzler is the compound. This is the level where they hold criminals with energy-related abilities for government agencies, while at the same time using them to aid in energy research. While showing Dazzler around, we see Solar, Nucleo, and finally Klaw. While standing outside of Klaw's cell, Quasar has to stop and take a call on his communicator. While waiting for Quasar, Dazzler observes that Klaw has a small monitor where he can communicate with the outside world without using sound. While standing there, Klaw passes on a warning to Dazzler. "Don't trust them. Soon you'll be a prisoner like the rest of us." As Quasar and Dazzler leave, we see that the seed of doubt has been successfully planted. Next, we're given a full-page spread where we see the full range of Dazzler's powers being tested. We're shown that she's capable of absorbing incredible levels of sound, putting forth bursts of blinding light, using light as a powerful enough laser to put a precision hole through 6 inches of concrete, transforming her light into a kind of fog, and creating a strobe effect over a large area. It's implied all of this testing took place before lunch of her first day. After a week of testing and nobody knowing where she is, understandably a number of people are beginning to get worried about her disappearance. Everyone from her manager to her mother to Johnny Storm. The scientists have reams of data, and Dazzler is exhausted from a week of pushing her limits and ready to get back to her own life. For the readers of Dazzler and fans of the character, this panel is extremely important, as a number of things that had been discussed outside of the comic finally become canon. We're told there is no limit to the amount of energy Dazzler's body can change into light. There is also a bit of foreshadowing here with the scientist warning that Dazzler could completely absorb a sound, even after it stopped. Whatever that means. Project Pegasus wants to run more tests in hopes of discovering what would happen if she attempted to store sound in such a manner, but Dazzler has had enough. She doesn't care if she's outed as a mutant anymore, she just wants to go home. Then the boys at Project Pegasus start getting pushy again, pointing out that she signed paperwork that agreed she would stay through the end of the testing. Dazzler decides that the scientists are going to keep coming up with reasons to keep her at Project Pegasus no matter what, so she decides it's time to try sneaking out. Dazzler uses the rail system that surrounds the project to head towards the surface. Lucky for her, the guards have their radio on, giving Dazzler the sound she needs to go on the offensive and make a break out of Project Pegasus. As she makes the move to escape, Quasar steps in and stops her. He wants to talk things out, and even though Dazzler likes Quasar, she's determined to leave. Dazzler pushes out a dazzle burst like she did to the guards, and is shocked to discover that Quasar simply absorbs the light. She follows up with a laser blast, but aims for the floor instead of Quasar. Dazzler is upset and exhausted after her escape attempt, and Quasar convinces her to return to her room. The next morning, Quasar joins Dazzler for breakfast. Dazzler is put on her stage clothes to help cheer herself up. Quasar wants Dazzler to give the project a chance, and on the other hand, Dazzler wants to know if this is such a good place, then why do they operate a prison? Quasar tries to brush it off, pointing out that those being held pose a threat to society. Dazzler, now knowing some of her true potential, asks what happens if they think that she could become a menace. Quasar thinks she's being paranoid, but Dazzler points out she was tailed for weeks before being kidnapped. To this, Quasar has nothing to say, just looks down at his mug. And I have to wonder, as head of security, did he have anything to do with the manner in which Dazzler was brought in? After breakfast, Dazzler, by chance, walks by Klaw's cell as a safety sound check of some sort is being done. Before the experiment begins, Klaw warns Dazzler that she should leave, that it'll be too horrible to watch. As she watches, the Pegasus employees begin poking inside of the cell with their sonoprobes, or whatever it is, and Klaw, who isn't in pain at all, shows off his acting skills by writhing in agony. Dazzler, thinking of herself as one of the good guys and sick of being held captive, decides to rescue Klaw. She uses the sound of the sonoprobes to knock the employees out with a burst of light, but this was enough to cause a small tear in the soundproof membrane of Klaw's cell. And with sound comes freedom. And for Dazzler, instant regret. Klaw shoots Dazzler with a burst of sound. He says it's her reward for freeing him, a taste of his power. I'm never certain when reading this panel if he's attempting to kill her, or if he knows enough to attempt to pass along some of his power to her. Either way, the result is a glowing Dazzler. The guards give chase, and Chief of Security Quasar is on the scene in seconds. The guards can't get through Klaw's sonic wave, and he's capable of vibrating the bullets to dust before they reach him. That's pretty cool. And here we go, Quasar versus Klaw. Klaw claims he was bested the last time that these two faced off by trickery. That's not quite true, as it was the energy nullifying effects of the aura that surrounds Wondar, now the Aquarian, that canceled out the Klaw's sound and forced him to retreat back into his device. We see Quasar developing his usual approach to a problem here. First step, contain the threat. A light cage is quickly put around Klaw, and this is so cool. Klaw has been studying Quasar's powers and devised a burst of sound with the right level of vibrations to completely disrupt the cage around him. Klaw then throws a burst of lethal sound particles towards Quasar, who barely gets a shield up in time. Even then, it's not enough to stop the incoming onslaught, only enough to slow it down. Quasar dodges a couple of attacks and attempts a full-scale quasi-stellar energy burst. It does nothing. Klaw has planned ahead and made the appropriate adjustments to neutralize Quasar. That isn't to say that Quasar couldn't tap into different portions of the energy spectrum in order to throw off Klaw's plan, but I mention once more that he's still learning about his powers and hasn't started thinking outside of the box on how he can use them. Klaw blasts Quasar with what appears to be a killing blow. Dazzler runs in to find Quasar laid out on the floor and proceeds to call him by his real name in front of the villain. Why, Dazzler? Why? Q isn't dead yet because Klaw wants Dazzler to back off so he can finish the job of killing him, but Dazzler argues that Klaw should be happy with his freedom and leave. Klaw says he would, but he doubts that a goody two-shoes like Quasar would leave him alone. So Q has to die, and if Dazzler doesn't want to back off, he'll be just as happy to kill both Dazzler and Quasar. Dazzler attacks with massive amounts of light, which, just like when she did it to Quasar, Klaw stands idly by, not affected in the slightest. Dazzler asks if she can try a few more tricks against Klaw, and Klaw, feeling overconfident in his newfound freedom, agrees to let Dazzler give it her all. Point-blank range attacks, maximum flare, and concentrated laser burst all fail to do anything to Klaw. Klaw does show a little bit of mercy in promising Dazzler a fast death, but then Dazzler also gets a little carried away. She tells Klaw that if he doesn't make sure she's dead, that someday she'll find him and make him pay. Klaw blasts Dazzler with sound waves. Okay, anybody else see the problem for Klaw? Dazzler absorbs sound waves. Instead of collapsing, Dazzler stands in place, growing stronger by the second, while Klaw grows weaker. Dazzler is enjoying the sensation of absorbing Klaw's sound. Klaw is amazed that she can take this much power, which is when Dazzler reveals to him that she's a living transducer. At some point in these panels, you get the feeling that Dazzler has started to actively draw power from Klaw. When she says that she can't cut off absorbing his energy any longer, it's because she can't resist the feeling of raw power flowing into her. Slowly, Klaw fades away and his prosthetic device falls to the floor in silence. Dazzler is left feeling sick with the realization of what she's done, and Quasar, running up, lets her know he was a witness to it. The first full sentence out of her mouth after the event is an admission of guilt. I'm a murderer. There it is, plain and simple. I'm a murderer. I bring this up because Dazzler later does go to trial for Klaw's murder. A murder that she eventually gets off for, but I'm not entirely sure that that should be the case. We saw her just before the attack threaten Klaw by saying the fact that if she doesn't make sure she's dead, then someday she'll find him and make him pay. Right after that, Klaw attacks, she absorbs the attack, and ends up absorbing him to the point of death. I don't really know if this is something that she should be able to get away with. We saw in the case of someone like Captain Marvel in the New Warriors who actually had to pay for overusing his powers in killing an abusive father, and I don't really see where this situation would be much different, or should be. But for now, Dazzler's informed by one of the project's employees that she's absorbed energy beyond the threshold she can store it at, and attempts to convince her to release it under controlled conditions back in the lab. Which makes sense. Instead, though, Dazzler uses the increased energy levels to blast a hole into the side of the mountain Project Pegasus sits upon. Quasar claims he couldn't do a burst of energy at that level, capable of blasting through tons of steel, concrete, and earth. Little does he know, he could. But for some reason, the scientists are still convinced that Dazzler is returning to the lab with them. Dazzler is so upset about killing somebody and being held captive that she has a bit of an outburst that ends up being expressed through her powers as well. And for the first time, we get to see Dazzler use her powers to fly. Dazzler feels like she can't control her powers, and they begin radiating involuntarily. She despairs over becoming a monster and throws herself to the ground somewhere in the woods of upstate New York. All the while, there is one who is very aware of where she is. Drone R11, who observes from Galactus' starship. I'm not going to get into the full scope of this story arc right now, but I will touch on it after I've started discussing Galactus. For the time being, I do want to follow up on Quasar's portion of it. Quasar and a number of guards from Project Pegasus leave to track down Dazzler. After a bright burst of light on the horizon, Quasar flies ahead to see what's happening. We get a great panel here of the guards just talking back and forth. I really enjoy it as it's the kind of thing we don't get to see very much of. It's just some guys out on patrol complaining about their job and how they better shut up before the boss hears them. All of a sudden, Galactus' starship takes up the sky over Mount Athena. And true to any sci-fi alien abduction movie, Dazzler is lifted into the air by a burst of bright light. Quasar tries to absorb the beams of energy, but is cut off by some kind of built-in defenses. Dazzler disappears into the ship. Quasar attempts to blast his way into the ship, but his efforts do no good. He's left banging on the outside, demanding to be let in. And then the starship disappears from Earth's atmosphere. Which is a bit of a down note. I mean, here we are, our hero, left behind. Quasar is listed as having a few more appearances in Dazzler, with one exception. These are nothing more than single-panel flashback scenes where she reminisces about how cute Quasar was. There's a single panel where Quasar testifies at her trial, but to my knowledge, these characters don't cross paths again after that. Next time, Quasar faces off against Spider-Man. Thanks for watching. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.